Hi, everybody. I've hesitated a lot about having this conversation, but to be honest, this is something that's been weighing on my mind more heavily than anything I've ever experienced before. And I just felt that I had to join the conversation in some small way and input the experiences that I have. So I'm going to discuss the ramifications around the discussions that are happening uh, on the back of Adolescence, which is the British limited series that's come out. I don't watch much stuff nowadays with family situations. I felt I really had to make the effort and see this just because it had so many intersections, so many interesting things cinematically, for starters, with all the episodes being shot in a single take with this hyper realism. And it's an amazing piece of cinema. I'll just put that out there first. But think after I'd seen it, really, it was the subject matter that made me feel I just need to join this conversation. So, what can I add to the conversation? Well, I have worked in prisons. I have worked in schools. I'm familiar with the criminal justice system, and I am absolutely passionate about the plight of young men, teenagers, boys, and young men in particular, and what the world is currently doing to them and what they are doing to the world. And I am going to try to navigate these treacherous waters. But I do feel this is a conversation that needs to be had, and I am not satisfied with most of the dialogue that is going on around this. I'm finding it really quite difficult. So, Adolescence is split into four episodes. The first one takes place in a police station, the second one takes place in a school, third is a psychiatric interview, and then the fourth is the family of the alleged murderer. And I think what's been upsetting me so much about the way a lot of these conversations have been happening is that what I'm hearing is people saying uh, it's that the 13-year-old who's accused of murdering the girl, who I think, for me, this series makes it very obvious he has murdered the girl. I don't even know why that's. I don't fully understand why that's being brought into question. If you understand the drama, so let's just say he's a murderer, and a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people seem to be jumping on the bandwagon of this is the result of social media. And I 100% accept that it is a large part of it. But that is not what I took away from seeing this hyper realistic depiction of a 13-year-old boy being arrested and charged and interviewed, and the effect that has on his community and on his family. The message I took away from it is we did this. And that's what I agree with, and that's what I want to make the case for. We as a society are responsible for the way that young people's minds, but particularly young boys' minds, are formed. And it's not just social media. The social media, the manosphere, incel culture, all those secret emojis, they are the tip of the iceberg. They are the symptom. They are not the cause. And I just see incredible danger that we would say, oh, see, that's it. We just need to solve the social media issue and then we are going to solve this problem. Well, I can assure you that is not the case. I had very similar experiences to a lot of what's depicted in this, and that was before social media. I got my first phone, not smartphone, when I was 17. So I can assure you that these are some eternal issues and they are not going to go away if we can solve the social media issue, which we absolutely need to do, but it is only part of the problem. The very first episode that we see Jamie, the murderer, being the police come in and they take him out of his bed and they take him to the police station and they process him. And this was very difficult to watch because I work in prisons. As I say, I've worked in many of the male prisons in Scotland, and it just felt very close to home. I think in some ways, what is most harrowing is just seeing the efficiency with which it's all done. The fact that this is just a job for so many people, and yet a young girl has lost her life, and a family's life is about to be turned upside down, and the effects of the community is so far-reaching. But this is just business as usual. And if we're thinking about power, there is still in this country there is a supremacy of institutionalism, obviously. So and so there should be. If somebody is accused of murder, then men and women should have the power to be able to smash their door down, break into their house, and take them away to a police station for questioning and for a fair trial. But it sort of sets the scene quite cleverly that that's where we are. When push comes to shove, there is still power is still about institutional supremacy. Like the institutions have the ultimate power, and we try to be fair through the criminal justice system. But ultimately, we are all going to be victims of that institutional power in one way or another. I don't want to say too much more about that because I think that one's fairly obvious. We all know that prisons are desperately awful things, and they are very hard to survive if you are an inmate. But we also know that crime has to be punished, and that somebody who has murdered somebody is not safe to be left in society. So we have to go further back and we have to say, well, how could we maybe possibly prevent this from happening in the first place? And this is where I think the disagreements come in. Episode 2 was set in a school, and I think people, maybe some people watching that, they saw the behavior in that school, the lack of empathy those pupils had for the murdered girl, the way that they spoke to the teachers, the shouting, the jostling, the violence, the law of the jungle. That's what I want to the emphasis I want to make is that it's William Golding. It's Lord of the Flies. Really, we have lost control, and what you see is what you would expect to see in that situation. You see primates fighting it out. Um, Under the illusion that we are still doing some sort of education thing with them. Like you see in so many schools, the police are walking through the schools, and you see the eco committee up on the wall, and you see these like we are, we're doing all these good things, and yet the place is in utter chaos. There is no respect. There is no compassion. The strong rule, the gregarious, the aggressive seem to have supremacy in this situation. And I would emphasize this has been the case long before social media um, came on the scene. Social media has 100% impacted that, and I think the desperately sad thing about social media is that the young people, don't get a break. They deal with all this at school, and then they have to take it home, and then it continues at home. So if it's a toxic atmosphere at school, it's a toxic atmosphere at home, and that continues. But as I say, to say that I think that's missing the point, to say that that's the problem. Because if it was a wonderful, supportive, empathetic environment at school, then that might also continue at home, and people would still be sending each other encouraging messages and banter and so on. And these sort of murderous ideas that arise in the toxic area of social media would not be such an issue. We have done this. Our obsession with institutions, our complacency that we can make it the law that a child has to attend school for their entire life, and that they are not treated as a human being, that they're treated as a number or as a problem that needs to be solved. That the underlying contempt that we have, that came across very strongly in the second episode there. Now, I am not blaming teachers. My goodness, do they have a very difficult time? In fact, I'm not really blaming anyone. I'm just saying this is where we are. I'm part of the problem too. I'm a teacher. I work in schools. Not I'm not employed by the council. I'm self-employed, but I do music in schools and things. I just don't want to be part of the problem anymore. I want to be part of the solution. But the way that it's all dealt with, the way that people are talked about, the way that the assumptions that we make I just think it's all wrong. It's just so dehumanizing, and it's compulsory. It's the law that you have to be part of this environment that for so many young people is psychological torture. And we're saying you need to consent to psychological torture. Now, of course, there are wonderful things about school. There are, for many, many children, and I know them, there are children that school will be their safe place and they need it. And we saw the effects of that during COVID lockdowns, how that massively widened the attainment gap, and how it just was great for some children who had good, stable families, and was really awful for some children who had very chaotic home lives. So I don't want to do away with it. I just want to raise the point that I'm afraid has been my experience, that much of what I see of the school environment is dehumanizing, not deliberately, but it's just the way it's set up. That we have got complacent, we have allowed ourselves to settle into habits that are um, that are contributing to this problem that people are currently attributing solely to social media. It's been going on for years, and it's not going away. Now, the third episode is incredible. Back to, again, just not going to dwell on it, but what happened here was just amazing because it's all in one shot, and it's a hour-long interview with this 13-year-old boy and the psychiatrist who's assessing him to see if is if he understands what he's done or not, or to what extent he understands what he's done. And I think for many people, they'd say this was the most chilling episode of all because it's so psychological. And the 13-year-old, I think he was 14 at the time, but the young actor gives an amazing performance and shows the almost dual personality that Jamie has. But for me, and I don't hear many other people saying this, for me, I think the key line that the series is all about, and the message that I want to drive home, is at the end of this episode, of episode 3. Because all the way through the interview, the psychiatrist has been trying to get the truth out of Jamie, and has been trying to, she's been doing her job. She's been doing her job admirably. She's been trying to assess what he understands. She's got on side with him, giving him hot chocolate, sandwiches, all for very clever reasons. But, on the surface, she's showing empathy and some compassion, and she's being very professional. But he's a smart boy, and I think he knows when people are being nice to you, it's not because they like you. And he says some very disturbing things. That's where we get into the social media stuff and the incel culture and the manosphere stuff. I'm not defending any of that. I have no wish to defend that. I think it's awful, but I do think it's overstated. But the impression you get is that he is really just a damaged individual, that his perspectives are so wild, that his worst crime is being a virgin at 13, and he invents sexual encounters and things that I think would be shocking to a lot of people, but this is where we're at with a lot of these young people. That's the air that they breathe when they're surrounded by this at school, and they're surrounded by it at home, and because of the social media, and because they don't get to switch off. And there just isn't strong voices being presented as an alternative to that. And that's what I want to come back to. But that's this key moment, I think, is after that interview, and he's freaked out, and he's got aggressive, and he's being dragged out the room, and she's just told him this will be our final interview. And that's what's triggered it, because she's got the information she needs. And he says, "Can I ask you a question?" And he says, "Do you like me? Not like fancy me, but do you like me?" And she can't answer. I think she can't answer for professional reasons. A psychiatrist would be able to let me know. Or maybe it's she just can't bring herself to answer. Certainly, after he's dragged out the room and he's banging on the glass, and you hear his cries echoing down the corridor, um, she breaks down and she has this huge emotional response to what she's just been through, which is totally understandable because it was a harrowing hour to watch, let alone to be part of. Um, but I wonder if it's actually that. I wonder if it's that realization that this is what we're doing to our teenage boys. We, for whatever reason, they don't believe that anyone likes them. They don't believe that they have a place in the world that can be a positive place, that can gain them affection and can gain them uh, a sense of purpose. They just don't believe anyone likes them. And that, for me, is really what this is about. Why do young boys get sucked into an incel culture, manosphere, any of this stuff? Well, to me, it's perfectly logical. It's perfectly logical if you believe that nobody likes you. If you think if you don't understand that sex and love are supposed to be connected in any way, if you don't understand that power is to be used in the service of others, because that's not the model that you've been shown. If there aren't strong voices giving them an alternative, I don't know what you do about that, actually, because I do think that's where we're at. I think most boys that I speak to, that would be where they're at. They believe that the world as a whole does not like them. Now, at this point, if you are feeling, well, that's okay, that if you're okay with that, because you feel that there has been enough historical wrongs from the male gender as a whole, that a little bit of retribution, a little bit of anxiety, depression, and worthlessness is warranted. I don't really have anything to say to you. I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree. So at this point, I'm just talking to the people that for whom that hurts as you as much as it hurts me to know that there are so many boys that feel that nobody likes them. I mean, I could give you hundreds of stories. I'll give you one, but I remember when I was out with Christiana playing in a park in quite a deprived area, social deprivation, and big high rise, people sort of shouting out the windows. Um, can I say before I tell the rest of the story, that's a theme that comes up again and again. I wonder how many people spot that. In the police station, you hear people shouting, banging on the doors and shouting, as happens in prisons, shouting through the doors. In the school, again, as they're walking along the corridors, you hear that people shouting in the classroom, that toxic male yell that we can all imagine. Um, and then in that third episode, you hear Jamie doing that on the glass as he's dragged away, he bangs on the window, and you hear him shouting. And you hear people shouting as the psychiatrist walks into the building and gets her stuff all sorted as well. Just those shouts coming over. And then in the fourth episode as well, the youths youths vandalized dad's van, and you hear them shouting. Well, there's a lot of shouting in the fourth episode as well, and that for me is a theme. There is a, if you can hear it, there is a cry that's happening. You can hear it everywhere, especially hear it in Glasgow. You walk down the street and you'll hear it. Somebody will be shouting, and it's that anguished cry that things are just not right. And that features in every episode. Anyway, back to my story. So I'm in this park with Christiana, the high rise. There's people shouting out the window, washing hanging out of the windows, and people sort of going in and out, looking a little bit sorry for themselves. And there was a wee boy there, maybe about 8 or 9 years old, just kicking a football around, and some older boys came up and just started laughing at him and saying just the things that nasty older boys will say, like, oh, you can't even do a keepy uppy, or like, oh, what are you doing? You're embarrassing yourself. What a loser. Some stronger language than that. That sort of thing. Didn't get aggressive or anything, but just low level contempt. And then they went off. So I felt, "Ugh, that was kind of horrible." And So, next time he sort of kicked the ball close to me, and he was trying to do some keepy uppies or whatever it was, little skills with his football. And, I just like, oh, nice, good job, or something like that. And, his just, he didn't say anything. He didn't respond because boys don't tend to, men don't tend to. But he just grew an inch, and his face just kind of lit up, and he just kept doing it really intensely. And then he kept on doing his skills, doing his little football skills closer and closer, just in our vicinity. Again, always just in the hope that he would just get another little compliment, another little bit of encouragement. And so each time I complimented him or said, "Oh, good job," or whatever, and he just beamed, and it just reinforced, so many boys and young men, they're just starving for encouragement, but it has to be from the right source. Like, they don't believe it if it's a teacher telling them. I know this because I know that people, when I'm a teacher, people don't believe me when I tell them they've done a good job. When I'm not being a teacher, they do, because of this institutional supremacy issue. They don't believe it when they're being taught, here's all your rights, and here's why you're so special, and here's why you're so wonderful. They know that when push comes to shove, that doesn't hold any water. When it comes to what they really want, um, they won't be listened to. We are very good at giving the appearance of wanting what's best for children, but then we actually just do what we think is best for them. Um, we're not really that interested in listening to what they have to say. And this need for encouragement and for affirmation is just absolutely massive. They're starving for it. And it feels like when you give it to them, it feels like you are feeding a starving person. That's honestly what it feels like. So what happened, in a society where we're supposed to be more compassionate, we're supposed to be better at all this stuff. In Scotland, the United Nations Rights of the Child is in Scots law, and doesn't that mean that we're smashing this? Well, okay, so this is where it gets really difficult, but I think I need to be honest about what I see. I think we need a truce between males and females, because understandably, because of historical wrongs, I think on a very broad level, women feel intimidated by men, and they see this opportunity. Well, while they're still young, while they're boys and teenagers, we can address this. We can make sure that they are not going to be a threat when they get older. I think this has failed. I think this has backfired, and I think that's a huge part of what's going on. I don't take any pleasure in saying that, but I feel I need to be honest about that, because that is what I see. Men and boys, you can't domesticate them. You can't cut their wings and then not expect there to be negative consequences. It would be a lot easier if that was the solution, but I'm afraid it's not. What happens is that you build up a huge amount of frustration, a huge amount of anger or they just close into themselves. So what you would expect to see is rising levels of aggression, um, verbal or otherwise, but yeah, not necessarily physical aggression, um, retreating into uh, men-only spaces where they feel validated, or you'd expect to see huge rises in mental health issues, anxiety, depression, as the aimlessness and the lack of purpose and the frustration all consolidates into a general feeling of despair. And I believe that's exactly what we're seeing. So, I mean, in the fourth episode, it's we see the family, we see the devastating effect that it's had, and that there's a scene at the very end where the father, um, he finally goes into his son's room, which he hasn't been able to bring himself to go into for presumably about a year, and he just breaks down on his son's bed and weeps and says that he should have done more. And I think that's where we're at, to be honest. I think people will recognize the problem. I think this program will massively help people to recognize the problem. And most men do accept responsibility and do wish that they could solve it, do wish that they could do more. Um, and there are obviously bad actors, but the current system lets these bad actors call all the shots. In schools, it's the law of the jungle. The bullies rule the roost because we have ceded control for ideological reasons, and we are more interested in the appearance of doing the right thing than actually doing the right thing in these situations. I'm not going to leave this rather bleak discussion without trying to present a solution. And I don't think everyone's going to like the solution, and that's okay, because I don't know what the solution is, and if you've got a better solution, great. But I don't think the current solution of trying to make boys more like girls is going to solve the issue of toxic masculinity. As I say, in some ways it'd be a lot easier if it would, but it won't, and it's backfiring really badly, and I see that all the time. And if even if you only care about girls, well, it's not going to solve the problem unless you want to actually wipe out all men. That might solve the problem. But if you're going to stop short of wiping out all men, we need a better solution, and we need a truce on this war of the sexes. We need to accept that there have been historical wrongs that need to be righted and that have been righted. But we need to stop shaming men for being men. We need to stop stigmatizing masculinity. And we need to be open to some solutions that include a healthy view of masculinity, which is not dictated by feminism. Okay, I've said it. That's the bit that I know will be difficult to hear for some people. That is my experience of working in many prisons, many schools, knowing many teenage boys, seeing toxic masculinity firsthand, hating it, wishing I could do something about it, but not believing that the current solutions are working. Here is my proposed alternative. We need to bring back what has in the past been called chivalry or gentlemanlike behavior. We have to bring back the concept of the gentleman, of the knight, somebody who recognizes that they have strength and power, but makes a solemn oath to use that in the service of others. I think men get excited by that concept. Good men get excited by that concept. There will always be evil men. There will always be evil women. There's we're not going to be able to change that. But I'm not talking to them. I'm talking to the vast majority of men who feel that they are, as I say, that their masculinity is somehow shameful. It's it's time to reject that. It's time to stand tall and accept who you are, and uh, to try to make the world a better place. So I'd like to read for you the pledge of a gentleman, which is something I've written. Three things that we need to accept, three things that we need to reject, and three things that we need to choose to do. I accept that I have power and strength in various forms. I recognize that this strength can be used for good or for evil, to protect or to intimidate. I accept that I have a responsibility to my family, my community, and to the world. There are times when my decisions will require courage and will be costly. I choose to accept that cost. I accept that my beliefs and values may bring me into conflict with those around me. I know I must stand for what I sincerely believe is true, with much grace for those who disagree. I must seek wisdom, always accepting that I have much to learn. I reject the voices inside and outside of my mind that tell me my masculinity is inherently shameful. I will not fear the judgment of a world that cannot see the value of a good man. I reject the belief I have nothing to offer my family, my community, and the world. They desperately need gentlemen who have chosen integrity and responsibility, and I choose to dismiss the confusion and noise that makes me question that. I reject the feeling that my voice doesn't matter, that I have no right to speak, no right to the respect that every human deserves. I have something to bring to the conversation. I deserve to be heard without fear of being silenced by shame. I choose to use all my strength to protect the weak, to challenge evil, and to serve my neighbour. I sincerely believe that in doing this, I'm fulfilling my part in building a better world. I choose to accept responsibility for my actions. I know that as a man, I have a special role in the world, and I embrace it wholeheartedly. I choose to use my words with care and reverence. It is my desire to encourage and empower, not to tear down and defeat. I will not return fire when I am attacked by damaging rhetoric. I will hold my tongue and take it like a man. This is my pledge.